Ladies, we need to talk. If you're sitting here today, maybe you felt at some point in your life what it's like to be the woman with no friends. You've been in that quiet room wondering why others seem to have those deep connections, those close circles, and yet you feel alone. Maybe you've questioned if it's something about you. Maybe you've wondered what's wrong or why you've ended up here. Well, I'm here to tell you nothing is wrong with you. We live in a world that places so much importance on social connections. We're told you need a tribe, you need a support system. And while those things can be wonderful and nurturing, it's also okay to be the woman who doesn't have a circle. It's okay to be the woman who stands alone. But let's be honest, the silence that comes with being without friends can be deafening. The feelings of loneliness, of watching others connect and wondering where you fit in, can create a sense of longing. It's a longing for companionship, for deep, meaningful relationships that fill your heart. And yet, in the absence of those connections, something miraculous happens. You find yourself. When you don't have friends, at least, not the ones you want, it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning. It's an opportunity. Solitude has a way of bringing us back to ourselves, doesn't it? In the quiet moments when the phone isn't ringing, when the invitations aren't coming, there's space to reconnect with the most important person in your life, you. And let me tell you, that is power. There's a strength in solitude that society doesn't always talk about. While people are rushing to fill their lives with distractions, you, my dear, have the gift of reflection. You have the power to look inward, to ask yourself the tough questions, to rediscover your passions, your purpose, your voice. Because you are enough. You don't need a friend to validate your worth. But let's be clear, it doesn't mean you have to be happy with the lack of friendships. Let's not sugarcoat this. There are times when loneliness stings. But if we take a moment to examine this feeling, we realize it's not about being without friends, it's about finding the right ones. It's about realizing that not every person is meant to walk through every season of your life. Maybe some of us have experienced toxic friendships that left us feeling drained, unappreciated, or even worse, unseen. Let me say this, it is better to have no friends than to have the wrong friends. It is better to stand in your truth with no one beside you than to settle for relationships that do not honor your soul. Sometimes being alone is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of discernment. It's a sign that you are setting the standard for the kind of people you want to share your life with, and that is not only okay, it's necessary. So to every woman who feels she has no friends, I want to leave you with this: you are never truly alone. The relationships that will nurture you, the friendships that will nourish your spirit will come when the time is right. But in the meantime, you have the most powerful connection you'll ever need, your connection to yourself. Remember, you don't need to be defined by the number of people around you. You don't need to be defined by society's idea of what your social life should look like. You are powerful just as you are. You are worthy just as you are. And the right people will come into your life when you are ready, when you are open, and when you have learned to love and embrace yourself fully. So stand tall, walk in your truth, and know that every single step you take in the direction of your own healing will eventually lead you to the relationships that are meant for you. Thank you. This speech follows a tone of empathy, personal growth, and empowerment while offering a hopeful perspective for women who may feel isolated. Embrace solitude. In today's world, we're constantly surrounded by noise, by people, by distractions, whether it's social media, the demands of work, or the never-ending chatter of day-to-day life. It can feel like there's always someone or something pulling at us. And in the midst of all this, solitude, a space of quiet and stillness, can seem almost foreign. But here's the thing, solitude is not a punishment. It is not a void or an empty space to be feared. Solitude is a gift. It's an invitation to reconnect with ourselves, to hear our own thoughts, and to understand what we truly need. When we don't have the constant influence of others in our lives, we can tune in to the quiet voice inside of us that knows exactly who we are, what we want, and how we are meant to move through the world. Solitude is not about loneliness, it is about self-discovery. There are so many women who fear being alone. We've been conditioned to believe that our value is in our connections to others, our relationships, our friendships, the people we are surrounded by. But what if I told you that the most powerful relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself? When was the last time you truly sat with yourself without distraction, without the need to entertain anyone else's expectations, without worrying about what anyone thinks? When was the last time you truly listened to your own voice, your own heart, your own desires? Solitude gives you permission to be without apologies, to be without explanations, to be without the weight of having to please anyone or meet anyone's expectations. Solitude allows you to find the freedom to be exactly who you are in all of your messy, imperfect, beautiful glory. In solitude, we can begin to peel back the layers of conditioning, the layers of shoulds and ought tos that society has placed on us. In the silence, we can begin to hear our own truth. And yes, that truth can be uncomfortable at first. It can be raw and messy. We might not always like what we hear. But that's part of the process of growth, because in order to grow, we must first be willing to confront ourselves. And solitude is the perfect setting for that confrontation. Solitude as a space for healing. Solitude, though, is not just about self-discovery, it's also about healing. Sometimes we experience wounds that we don't even realize are there until we're alone with ourselves. We've been so busy running from one obligation to the next, filling our lives with activities, that we've neglected the emotional scars that need our attention. When we are surrounded by others, it's easy to mask our pain, to push it aside, or to ignore it. But when we are alone, we are forced to face it. Solitude gives us the space to heal, to process our emotions, to let go of past hurts, and to forgive, whether it's forgiving others or, most importantly, forgiving ourselves. There's a quiet strength in this process. It's not the kind of strength that comes from external validation or praise. It's the kind of strength that comes from knowing that you are capable of standing on your own feet, facing your own wounds, and choosing to heal. In solitude, we can also begin to reflect on our relationships, what they have taught us, where we have grown and where we need to let go. Sometimes we hold on to toxic friendships or unbalanced relationships out of fear, out of a need to feel validated, or simply because we're afraid of being alone. But when we give ourselves the space of solitude, we can more clearly see which relationships are nourishing us and which are draining us. Solitude helps us to cultivate the clarity to discern what no longer serves us. The gifts of solitude. But let's not just think about solitude as a space to heal or reflect on the past. Solitude is also an incredible space for creation, whether that's creating the life you want to live, creating art, or simply creating a new vision of who you are. There is a magic in being alone that allows us to tap into the most creative parts of ourselves. When we are in solitude, we have no one else's opinions, no one else's judgments, no one else's distractions to shape our vision. We have the freedom to imagine without limitation, to dream without constraints. Think about it, some of the world's most brilliant minds, most creative artists, and most revolutionary thinkers spent significant time alone. Solitude is where ideas are born, where passions are nurtured, and where the quiet spark of inspiration can ignite into something beautiful. Whether it's writing that book you've always wanted to write, starting that business idea that's been brewing in your mind, or simply rediscovering a passion you thought you had lost, solitude provides the fertile ground for all of these dreams to take root. In the absence of external noise, we can hear the quiet whispers of our own desires. Solitude, far from being a void, is a space of endless possibility. Solitude as empowerment. So to the woman who feels she is alone in the world, I want you to know this: you are not less than, you are not weak, you are not incomplete. You are, in fact, standing in one of the most powerful places you can be, the place where you are forced to rely on your own strength, your own wisdom, and your own intuition. When we learn to embrace solitude, we are no longer waiting for others to validate us, to complete us, or to tell us who we should be. Instead, we begin to define ourselves. We choose our own path. We create our own meaning. And that, my friends, is the ultimate freedom. It takes courage to be alone. It takes courage to stand in the silence and be present with yourself. But once you step into that silence, you realize that you are never truly alone. You are surrounded by the most powerful presence you will ever need, your own. There is nothing wrong with being the woman who stands alone for a season. There is nothing wrong with being the woman who does not conform to society's expectations of what a social life should look like. Because in that silence, in that solitude, you are shaping something extraordinary, your own self. You are becoming who you are meant to be. Conclusion. So the next time you find yourself feeling alone, whether it's after a friendship has ended or when you're simply walking through a quiet period in your life, remember this: embrace it. Embrace the space that solitude provides. Use it to reflect, to heal, to create, and most importantly, to reconnect with yourself. In solitude, you are not missing something, you are gaining everything. You are gaining the gift of knowing yourself, the power to heal your own wounds, and the freedom to chart your own course. Solitude is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength. Embrace it. For in that space, you will find not emptiness, but fullness, the fullness of who you truly are. This expanded version of embracing solitude digs deeper into the emotional healing and empowering aspects of being alone, with the hope of reframing solitude not as something to fear, but as something to cherish and embrace.